Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Mike's On here on radio.com on this Thursday afternoon on a kind of cold January type Thursday day here in the big city. It's a lot nicer down there in Florida, especially when it doesn't rain, but it is what it is. And today was basically Judgment Day, and the judgments that came in for the new Giant head coach have been very positive for the most part. I think people have been impressed by his tact, and I think overall the first impression was a very good one today. Now, again, it's just an initial press conference. You can lose the initial press conference. You really can't do anything that overwhelming in the initial press conference, but you can do things that reverberate badly, like, as we know in the past, say the wrong thing. If you want to go back to the days of Bobby Bonilla, act harshly like a Randy Johnson, wear the wrong suit, as we've seen one Giant coach do in the past, or make a really weird impression like Gase did in his first foray into the waters of the New York media. Judge didn't do any of that today. You know, yesterday, when they lost Rule, I tweeted that the Giants were still in a fog because they wanted Rule and they let him get away. A couple of minutes later, we heard, and it really wasn't more than maybe an hour later, we heard that they were going to make Judge the head coach. And if you go back and look what I tweeted, was that the Giants surprised me that they made a solid choice, and this guy will coach the entire team, which is a positive because what I had heard about Judge in the last year or so was very positive. It was that this was a guy who had head coaching, had the kind of talents you need to be a head coach, had the kind of mentality and the kind of personality, and carried himself like a head coach. That's what I heard about him. I don't know him. I never met him, but I heard positive things about him, and I like the idea that he was a special teams coach. That's rare. You don't get many guys who are special teams coaches. Obviously, Harbaugh came the way of a special teams coach. There are plenty of special teams coaches who wanted to be considered in the past and didn't get considered as head coaches. Westhoff as one, but he was a very brash, outspoken, and confident special teams coach. So maybe that's why he didn't get as many looks as he probably could have. And I think Westhoff could have been a head coach. There are other guys who had special teams in their background. Bill Belichick did, as a matter of fact, before he became a noted defensive coordinator. Dick Vermeil dabbled in special teams. Marv Levy was a special teams coach. And George Allen ran the defense and was a special teams coach back in the days when coaches did a lot. Back in the days when you didn't have, 18 guys on a staff and didn't have a position coach for every position and an assistant for every position for the, so you had 20 coaches on a staff now, as they do in college and in the NFL right now. On big college teams and on NFL teams, the number of coaches is just boundless. It's endless. How many guys are there? Quality control, in college grad assistants, all the different things that you have now, assistants to the assistants to the assistants. But this was a guy who I thought was solid. And I listened to the press conference today. I didn't see it. I listened. And I was in the car, and I preferred listening to it than seeing it. Because if you're in the car and you're listening to it, you pay more attention to the words than you do watching on TV, where you're going to also look at all the surroundings and who's in the picture and who's reacting and this and that. So, I thought he came off like a football coach. I mean, I know you've heard that already today. I think he did do that. I think he seemed all business, answered the questions properly, didn't give any real crazy answers to anything, didn't dabble in things he shouldn't dabble in, like he didn't get into strategy back in the game, in the New England game when he was asked about strategy, didn't get involved. answered the questions the way you expect them to be answered, showed deference and respect to the people in the organization that he's coming into, that he should show respect to, and gave you a couple of things that you wanted to hear. Talked about coaching the entire team, not being a guy who's just on one side of the ball. And I've talked in recent years about how limiting I think that is. You know, so many guys have wanted offensive coaches, but even in the days of Rex Ryan, I always thought Rex Ryan, who was a really terrific defensive coordinator and had a boundless personality, he was so hung up on his unit doing well that he did not pay enough attention to the rest of the game. And I think that the offensive coordinators that you see, especially the play callers, they get so caught up on their side of the ball that it really hurts them in terms of the things you have to handle as a head coach. And this head coach said the things that head coaches say. And you can tell that he's picked up the nuances. He talked about knowing what's going on in the training room. He talked about knowing what's going on with the trainers and with the equipment guys and getting a feeling of the pulse of his team throughout every man on the team. Nobody stressed that more than a Parcells did when he was a head coach. He would go and make his rounds. He would go down when the players were working out. He would go down and challenge players in certain ways. He would always have connection to his equipment guys and his trainers and everybody in the building. And that's what you do as a head coach. The head coach, your job is problem solving and everything else. Everything impacts, anything that impacts your team, from the schedule you keep to the day you travel on to how you decide hotels to meals to who's around your team to assistant coaches to personnel to roster to every single thing. That's what a head coach does. He does everything. He puts out fires. He solves problems. He deals with the owner. He deals with the media. He deals with the players. He deals with everybody that needs to be dealt with. And he can't waste time and lose time on the things that he can't lose time on. He has to know his coaches are well-versed. He has to know that his coaches get what he's trying to get across and that they know how to teach what he wants taught. And in this guy who talked today about picking his own assistants and bringing some of the things that we talked about, the things I've heard, there's a couple of things that I notice about the really good head coaches that I've met, the really successful ones. Number one, they're the most negative people in the world. I mean, they create negativity. They're not happy unless they have negativity. All they see is negativity. They're the most negative people in the world, number one. Number two, they're always miserable. In season, they're happy for moments in season. Nothing pleases them in season, no matter what they're doing. If they're winning, they're worried about the things that's going to stop them from winning. If they're losing, they're worried about that. If they're doing well, they're worried about the things they're not doing well. If they're doing everything well, the one thing they're not doing well is what they're worried about. I remember games where the team would win really dramatically in a impressive fashion and win going away and win by multiple touchdowns and play a terrific game, stifling defense, terrific offense. And an hour after the game, the head coach is furious because they messed up a special teams assignment, and that's going to cost them 2 weeks from now. And it just dug at him and dug at him and dug at him. It's amazing the attention to detail that the good head coach deals with, and the psychological master that the good head coach is, because his job is two things. And everything he does goes into that job. His job is to give his team a plan that it can win with. And that the team knows, and that the coaches know, and that the owner knows, and that the coach knows that the game plan that I've come up with, if we perform well, is a winning plan. And number two, you get your team to play hard. That's it. It's not any more complicated than that. Never has been. Give them a plan they can win with and get them to play hard. But a lot of things go into that. A lot of things go into it during the week, building a team up towards a performance on Sunday, putting out the fires where there's problems, whatever those problems may be. Your star player might have an injury. He might be having a problem with the owner. He might be having a problem with the media. He might be having a problem with his family. You don't know what it is, but every one of those, every problem comes across the head coach's desk. If you're an assistant, it doesn't come across your desk. If you're a coordinator, it doesn't come across your desk. As the head coach, it comes across your desk. And your job is to come up with that game plan. Have your team ready to win that game and to give its best performance on that coming Sunday. And then bring the best players, bring the right players, bring the best players. And one of the things you do as a coordinator, as a special teams coordinator, is you pick from everybody. I talked about this yesterday, and Judge talked about it today, how you decide whether this guy's going to the game or that guy's going to the game, or can you live with this guy going to the game, and this position coach wants this guy because he can make a big play, but you don't. You want this guy because he can help you cover kicks. And you're going to win. Because that guy, that extra guy, he has to have a reason to come to the game. And a lot of times, as a backup deep back or a backup running back or a backup linebacker, you come to the game because you are good on special teams. You know, there's that special teams player. New England has one. Giants used to have one in Renee Thompson. Guys like that, special. The bottom line is those guys you know you bring into the game. But what about the other guys? And that's why it's all-encompassing for the special teams coach, unlike the offensive coach or defensive coach. So I like the general, because the head coach is someone who deals with everything. He's a generalist. He is not someone who specifies. He's not someone who is very good at one thing. He has to be able to handle the big picture and handle everything. And he can delegate, but he still has to have his thumb on it. And the guys who don't, the guys who just leave that coordinator alone or leave that side of the ball alone, you know what? Those aren't the guys that you want. The coach you want is the guy who handles everything and is down in that training room when they're lifting weights and is there and is motivating and is talking and knows everything that goes on in his building. That's the guy. And that's the mentality that I sense Judge wants to bring to the position. And that's a big leg up. It really is. And then I like the idea that he's tough and that he wants players to be accountable and he wants to play tough, physical football and be tough and demanding, because you know what? That's how I believe football should be played. It's also the way I believe you handle your team. In the NFL, nobody has to love the head coach, but they have to respect him. His word has to be law, and he has to hold his players accountable. It's imperative that he holds his players accountable. Absolutely imperative. Because otherwise, it just doesn't work. So it sounded like the press conference went well. Everyone seemed very happy compared to some of the other performances. I mean, McCarthy got pretty good reviews. Rule, I think everybody thought was a little bit of over the top. I didn't see Rule's press conference, but everybody seemed to be complaining about it. You know, they didn't seem to like it, despite how much money he got. But let's see. Let's go to somebody who was there and get, and again, of course, she asked the best question, which she usually does, and that's Kim Jones. Kim, welcome. How are you?
Mike, how are you? So
good,
great
thank
to
you.
talk to you.
My pleasure. What did you think today?
Listen, I thought he was good. I thought he came across as real, which I think has been a challenge in the past two hires for the head coaches for different reasons for the New York Giants. I thought I could see why they liked his interview. I thought that you could see, I thought that by some of his wording and word choices and philosophies, you could see and hear the Belichick ties. I thought in terms of his persona, he reminded me more of Saban than Belichick, especially at a press conference. I've only seen a couple of Sabans, but I've certainly seen Belichick's over the years. So I think it rightly gives the Giants and their fans hope, and I understand that. I also think, Mike, his staff and the way he puts that staff together is going to be incredibly critical.
Oh, I agree. And it sounds like he was asked that. And I listened to the press conference while I was driving, and sounds like that he's going to get to control his assistants and control his staff, which is a big positive. I think that's important. I'm a big believer that you have to let the head coach do that. And it sounds like he's going to get now. Budgets come into it, no question. Money comes into it, and especially in our area where the real estate is so expensive, it's some coaches blink when they try to find a house around here, as we know. I don't know if they're looking for a flashy coordinator a la North Turner or somebody who's going to, you have to give a lot of money to. I don't know what the plan is, but I like the idea that he says he's going to coach the whole team, and he's not leaving anybody alone to run part of the team, which I like.
Yes, I liked a lot of that, and I liked the way you just put it as well. I thought a couple of things. He's going to have guys who've been around. He's 38 years old. I pointed out in a completely objective win-loss graphic in the NFC East, as we know, Mike, he is in a division now with 3 veteran coaches who've all at least been to a Super Bowl, and 2 of them have won it.
Good point.
And he's 0-0.
Yep.
And Mike, I can't tell you. I mean, I know Twitter's a world that none of us should live in, but I can't tell you how many Giants fans, accosted me for being unfair. Mike, those are the numbers.
That's fair.
That is the reality.
And that's a very good
listen,
point too.
And fans can be
they've all been there.
Or offended by it all they want.
Yeah.
The Giants have to live in that reality where he's going to need help, and that doesn't mean he's not capable. That means he's just never done it before. And, Mike, I thought this was fascinating that John Mara said today after the press conference, off to the side, there were cameras, obviously reporters, but he didn't say it at the podium. He was asked specifically about Jason Garrett as offensive coordinator, and John said he would have no objection with that at all. He came across as very much liking that idea. Does that mean it happens? No, not just because John Mara likes it. But I did think interesting that John commented on that possibility to that extent.
Interesting. I know that the Maras like Garrett a lot.
Yeah.
And listen, first of all, as Kim knows, and I've said to the fans many times, everybody likes Jason Garrett. He is a wonderful man. He's impossible not to like. Everybody likes him. I mean, that's why you heard the Cowboys talking about they were almost in tears when they got rid of him. I mean, everybody likes him. He's a good guy. So, I mean, he's just and he's from a good football family. And, Jerry Jones talked about how the Garrett family's been in his life for so many years, and even his father was in his life and the whole thing. And so we understand that, and they are people, so that comes into it. I agree with you. He's going to need, at least on one side of the ball, a guy who he doesn't have to worry about.
Yeah.
Where I understand he wants to have his hand in everything, and I think he should, because Belichick always does, Parcells always did. They have their hand in everything. They go into every room and they command every room. But that doesn't mean you don't need some expertise there. So if you had a guy who's an accomplished head coach, a Garrett, a North Turner, as an offensive coordinator, that will take a lot of pressure off him, especially with a second-year quarterback.
Agreed. And John Mara also said today they've got to show some more patience than they have lately. Ben McAdoo here for a very short time, Pat Shurmur here for the 2 years as well. So I think while we don't know the length of the contract, at least I haven't seen anyone have that yet, and John would not divulge any of those details. They really like Judge. He was the best interview they've ever heard. Now, I heard Shurmur blew them away 2 years ago, but this was he said the best interview he's ever been part of with Joe Judge. And they are going to let him grow into the role. Now, as you know, Mike, that sometimes plays a little bit better in Tampa Bay
Yep.
than it does in the New York market.
Yeah,
But
this town is starved for some victories.
And
They need some victories. They really do.
And 12 wins over the last 3 years.
Right.
In my opinion, they've asked Giants fans to be more than patient, but
Absolutely.
perhaps a little bit more patient. But they truly have conviction about this guy. And one note that I picked up today, it's probably not all that significant, but as close as, Mara is to Jason Garrett and that family, Steve Tisch is at least as close to the Crafts. And I can guarantee you that there was I don't know that it was Bob, I think it was probably Jonathan Kraft and Steve Tisch had a conversation about this guy, and they got from ownership of the Patriots, not only Bill, but ownership, a complete endorsement of the job they believe Joe Judge will do for the Giants.
And I gather Belichick was very generous in his compliments towards Judge, too. I mean, in a very big way. And listen, it doesn't matter now what the Giants were going to do with Rule and whether or not Tepper stole him or not. Who cares? I mean, that's again, that means nothing at this point. Doesn't even matter, okay?
Right.
But I like that the Giants, if that did happen, if they got spun out on Rule and they got beat to the punch, and a lot of people think they did, doesn't matter. They were ready with another candidate. And, it was funny how it came down because I hear that wake up to Tepper going to Carolina and hear the whole thing about how, Tepper going to, Rule going to Carolina, and Tepper went to Waco and blew him away into contract and everything.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, wow, McCarthy's gone, Rule's gone. Man, the Giants are still in a fog. And then all of a sudden, an hour later, they have Judge. And I'm like, whoa. I said, and I had heard good things. I had not heard a lot about Judge till this year. Then I heard good things about him this year. But I was surprised the Giants moved so quickly. If they had been spun out by Rule, I was surprised they were able to get, so I don't know exactly what's true and what's not true about where they were and all this. It doesn't matter now. We know where everybody's landed. It really doesn't matter. But they clearly had their ducks in a row, and I give them credit for that because, to me, they've been very confused in recent years. Yeah. I didn't understand a lot of the things they've done in recent years. It seemed like this time they were a little more organized than they've been.
Well, and a couple things to that. They also lost out on Ron Rivera because they just weren't ready to even, talk to him, and all of a sudden he's with the Redskins.
Right.
Now, there are a million subplots there, given that he and Dave work so closely in Carolina. I'd love to have time to investigate that stuff. I don't. But there's a million things there, as we know, and now they're in the same division, so that'll be fun. The Rule thing, I largely agree with you. I do think for comparison purposes, it will be fun because for all of the hype around Rule, he's never coached in an NFL game. And we know that Joe Judge has never been a head coach in an NFL game, and they're certainly not in the same division. They will see each other irregularly, but we will always know, what each is doing. And
everybody already roots against Rule because he got so much money. I mean, that's it annoys people. Yeah. It annoys people. He's not
an underdog anymore.
Right. He annoys people how much money he got. So that's why now he becomes the bad guy because he got fortune.
And I would love to know, and I don't think it's knowable on my end, the role Belichick played in this, because remember, by their hiring Judge as they did, Josh McDaniels didn't even get the interview this time with the Giants.
Very interesting.
So one way or another, you could argue, it seemed likely after Rule was out that Bill was going to lose a coordinator to the Giants. Now, I'm not saying Josh McDaniels was an automatic if it weren't Judge. That's not my point, but I guess you could make that case. In that case, Belichick, again, a little bit of a kingmaker. I mean, I just find that a little bit interesting that Bill, had some sway there and used it to promote Judge.
I almost get the idea, Kim, for a second. I almost get the idea that that Belichick was looking to help John Mara if he could here, because I think he likes John Mara, and I really think he feels the Giants have been beat up recently, and I think he was giving him, at least imparting to him, the wisdom he had on which guy he liked, and I think he does like this guy. I think he likes him a lot.
Yeah, and that's completely plausible, and that's actually the most charming part of this, if all true. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's it's a nice move. It's a good job, Bill, type of thing. And that's the best case scenario. And I agree with you that I'd be inclined I'd be inclined to go with that right now from what we know.
And I don't know that, but I sense that because I know how highly that John Mara thinks of Belichick. We all know that. And I got the idea that maybe he feels, hey, boy, the Giants have been beat up enough. Let's send him somebody who knows what he's doing here. And, you get the idea that he has been schooling this guy. At least that's what people have told me, is that he has gone out of his way to school this guy in recent years to be a head coach.
Well, and the worst thing in the world for Bill, by the way, isn't that we all know that now. You know what I mean? This guy could end up being a great coach, and Bill's sitting there as the guy that made all of us, and including the New York Giants, really, aware of him. I mean, that's not a bad deal for Bill at this point either.
No, absolutely. And, and it's funny that the endorsement is so ringing because, let's be honest, as we all know, for a variety of reasons, a lot of Belichick's guys have not done well as head coaches. They really haven't. Yeah,
and this guy does seem in some ways a little different. I thought it was interesting.
I agree. He is different. I totally agree.
It's clearly a Belichick philosophy that the one thing he's learned is to be flexible with your personnel.
Yep.
Don't tell me what a player can't do. Tell me what he can do. And I think for the Giants, that is a breath of fresh air in terms of their roster, Mike, isn't perfect, as we know. Their offensive line certainly is not perfect. And had I been a bit of a smartass today, I was going to ask him if he could bring Dante Scarnecchia with him. Honestly, in the room, I didn't know how it would play, so I didn't. But it's a valuable it's a viable question if you could get him there to fix this offensive line.
Right.
But I think that for Judge, he's going to have to be open-minded to a lot of things he doesn't know, but I was impressed today by the things for which he has conviction. And they were the big things, big picture. And the Giants lately, and again, this isn't some grand insult where I'm trying to be a bad guy, the Giants lately have been small thinkers. I thought today from the podium he was a big thinker kind of guy, and I thought that was very attractive, meaning as an attractive quality in a leader.
Well, I heard things from him that I haven't heard since the days of Parcells. I heard things that he stated that, driving along made me smile because he talked about knowing everything that goes on in his building. He talked about meeting with equipment men and trainers, and Parcells used to hang around the equipment room and the weight room every morning. And the training room, which was off limits because they kept it freezing so they wouldn't go in. But the point is, he knew everything that went on. And if you're a head coach, you know this. You have to solve problems, and you have to know everything that goes on in your building. You can't be unaware. When you hear coaches say, "Oh, I wasn't aware this guy was this," you say to yourself, "What is this guy doing?" That's not how I've thought of head coaches. When I think of head coaches, they know everything that happens.
Right.
They know, and this guy seems to be that kind of coach where he talked about knowing what goes on, talking to players, understanding. And that's what you have to do as a head coach is you have to, make sure your coaches are on the right track and make sure your players are on the right track and make sure that, you asked him a question about culture, which was great. He talked about winning is the culture. He's right.
Yes.
He's right. You have to make it about winning. That's what it has to be about. And you want to hold the players accountable. And I don't know after one day if I'm sure of this, but I got the idea this is a guy who's going to hold players accountable.
Yes, and John Mara told the media today that everyone they interviewed loved Daniel Jones. Well, that's the only way we would know that Joe Judge loves Daniel Jones. I don't doubt it at all. But because the reason I say that we don't know it from Judge is when asked about Daniel Jones, and I asked him about Daniel in my one-on-one, he was also asked at the podium, and I'm sure others in their one-on-one interviews asked him about Daniel. Why wouldn't you? He's a rookie. He's a quarterback. But he essentially said he wasn't going to evaluate any player, and that when he did, he was going to evaluate players based on what he saw and what he perceived from them. In other words, clean slate for everyone.
That's it.
Which I do think is interesting, Mike, when you talk about a team that has a few really good players and then a lot of players we either don't think are that good or just don't know yet. Because, the short list begins with Saquon and Daniel at this point. There are a few other players on that list, but not a ton. So I do think interesting that at least publicly, Joe Judge has all of these guys sort of on equal I don't know you footing and is going to figure it out from there. Now, some of it's probably not exactly true, but I just thought in terms of striking the right chords today, I thought he did it.
I agree. We're talking with Kim Jones the day that the Giants named their new head coach, which has become something they've done recently a lot. Okay, and it's all, I
Yep.
know everything's always positive on the day,
Yes.
but this one feels a little different. I think Kim hit on it. The one thing he didn't do, Kim, that the Giants have been doing to us for years now, and I'm sick of, is trying to spin us. They've been
Yes.
trying to spin us every day. Gettleman,
Yep.
Shermer, they've been trying to spin us while it's been awful. We know it's awful, and they're trying to spin us. This guy didn't come in here today and try to spin anybody. He basically said, I'll tell you I'll let you know how I have players. I wish he would have said, you know what? They didn't have a Pro Bowl player this year, so, we'll
Right.
see what we have. This team hasn't won any games, so we'll see what we have. I wouldn't be here if they had a bunch of stars. I mean, so, that's the fact. And, we're tired of hearing how everybody loves all their players. Everybody loves all their players, except they didn't have a Pro Bowl player this year, and they won 4 games. So let's be honest, they don't have a lot of players.
100% true. And I agree with everything you just said. And listen, I said, I can't remember when, but at some point in the recent past, I was asked by someone about the kind of coach, that would work with this group, the young group that the Giants chose to be. They chose to be young. By the end of this season, it became an excuse that they were young, but they chose to be a young team, and they kind of gloated about it. And then it didn't work out, and it was, hey, wait, we're a really young team. That aside, I think that when you talk about this roster, you talk about players who really need to be led. They don't have it figured out. They may think they do in some cases, but they don't. Some of them don't know yet, Mike, how to be professionals. Gettleman quibbled with me on that at his end of the season press conference. In that forum, I wasn't going to go back and forth with him with specifics because there's no way I know his locker room better than he does. I'm going to give Dave Gettleman at least that much credit and more. I don't know his locker room better than he does, and they had issues in there about young players just not knowing and not absorbing the way that you have to act in this league in terms of preparation, in terms of timeliness, in terms of doing your job when you are trying to become a viable NFL player. They did not have that. This guy, I think, understands those things, and I think will change all of that. And that goes back to the culture question. I know we're all tired of the word culture. I am too, but it's the best word to kind of encapsulate the idea of being a pro. He wants a winning culture, and he wants players who put the team first. And where do we most hear that? In New England.
And this place has been crying out for a leader for years.
Yes.
I mean, there's been no leadership here, and and in this league, the coach has to lead. He has to lead, and we haven't had that for years since Coughlin left, and it's killed this team. Let's do something for a second because this is interesting. You got 4 guys now in 4 different spots. You made a great point about the division, which I hadn't even thought of, which is a great point, that they've all been successful when you think about it, and 2 of them have won Super Bowls, which is a very good point. Now it's a steep division from that standpoint. The guys in the new spots, starting with Ron Rivera in Washington, which one of the 4 do you think fits the spot of the new coaches? And Rule in Carolina, Rivera, Washington, McCarthy, Dallas, Judge here. Which one of the 4 do you think fits his new team the best?
This shocks me that my initial reaction is this, Mike, because I'm not. It just does. I'm starting to think Rivera in Washington. That is a defense that can get after you, that needs to be coached right and needs to be used right. But they have no, you talk about lack of talent, lack of players. They have no lack of talent on that defense in Washington. And I have to believe they're going to add to it with Chase Young.
Oh, they are. There's no question. They're already talking. They're already talking about it.
Right.
Yeah.
That one's going to be right. That'll be the bet of all time. For the best bet of all time for a draft. But over the years, I have no issue with Ron Rivera. I don't really know him that well, but I'm certainly not some Ron Rivera booster by any means. I just don't know him that well or know that much about him. It just feels like they might finally be getting some stuff right there. The idea that they acted as quickly as they did to bring in Rivera, the idea that if that defense is a lot better, then they can probably live with what almost certainly will be some still growing pains with Dwayne Haskins. Although I will tell you this, Mike, and I don't know if we've talked since then, I had the Redskins at the end of the season when the Eagles went in there and won a heck of a game. I thought it was going to be a bore. It was a great game.
Great game, yes.
I will say this, and it's two snapshots. From week 4, when we saw Dwayne Haskins enter that game and throw up on himself, basically, against the Giants, to that game, which I think was week 16, Dwayne Haskins improved. I can't even tell you how much.
Immeasurably.
Exactly.
I completely agree. And they played very competitively in those games.
They did.
And they could have won that game. And that game was misleading because the last play of the game, he threw the ball up for grabs and it went for a touchdown.
Yeah, yes. and that player, by the way, should have just fallen on the ground.
Right.
I thought that was a bad play all around. But yes, I 100%
and cost
agree
a
with
lot of Redskins fans a lot of money, too.
I'm sure it did. Yes, it did. And I'm sure that's what a lot of people besides me were thinking about because I didn't know the spread that day.
Yes.
I will say this. They've got some players, too. Terry McLaurin is going to be
very
a
good
nightmare.
And they played very hard down the stretch. Give Bill Callahan credit.
Yes,
they played very well for him.
100% agree with you, Mike. So
And Rivera's a winner. Let's be honest. The guy was a winner as a player. He was the glue on the Great Bear defense. He is a winning player. He has been a winning coach. The guy is a winner. There's no way around it. I'm not saying he's Knute Rockne, but the guy is a proven winner. He is.
Right. And what if Dwayne Haskins is just pretty darn good? What if he's not the best player in his draft class necessarily? What if he's not an All-Pro next year, which I don't think he'll be an All-Pro next year, by the way. But what if Dwayne Haskins is just a hell of a lot better than we saw against the Giants when he, came in that Week 4 game and it didn't go well? I mean, he has a great arm. I just find them most fascinating, even though I think every team in the division should be better next year because, let's face it, the division stunk.
Absolutely. And, this is a guy who's got as you said, he's been to a Super Bowl. He's got a winning record. He's won as he's motivated,
Mike.
Absolutely.
You think he wants his career to end with toward the end of the season firing by David Tepper? No chance. There's no chance. These coaches have egos, they have pride, and they should. There's no chance he wants to go out like that. By the way, what I meant to also say earlier, very fascinated that, I think I did say it, but the idea that the Giants didn't get a chance at him, I do think interesting, and again, a comparison that we're going to be able to make as time goes on.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a guy who won as a player, won as a coach, and that says a lot. How about McCarthy in Dallas?
Yeah, you just wonder if he can bring some structure. Here's my thing about Jason Garrett, because everyone who knows Jason likes him, as you noted earlier. I just think sometimes it's time, Mike. Sometimes it's time, After 7-8 years, generally speaking, I leave my job. You know what I mean? That's been my history in my life. I've had a handful of jobs, and it's always after about 6-7 years that I, look for something different. In this case, I've been at NFL Network a little longer, and I'm happy there. But I just think that sometimes it's just time. And I think it became time probably for both the Joneses and Garrett to move on, even though it sounds like Jason did as much as he could to try to keep that job. But maybe a new challenge is what he needs. Maybe working with a quarterback in particular would really suit his skills at this point, and he could stay viable and perhaps be a candidate next year. But I do think McCarthy goes in there with a lot of motivation as well, because we heard a lot about he and Aaron Rodgers didn't get along. We heard a lot about Mike McCarthy and maybe, just not being the right guy for however many jobs, over this last year plus. And now he gets one of the biggest jobs in the league with some of the best talent in the league. And he may turn it around, and he may turn this around quickly. I mean, the Cowboys weren't good enough this year.
I like his
staff.
I like what he's done, and he also brought in John Fossil, who's a very good special teams coach.
Great special, yes.
It really is. I think that's an excellent hire. I think he's already got a good staff, and I think McCarthy will do well there. And I think the roster's talented. Defense has to start to be able to take the ball away from somebody, but if they do that, the offense is loaded. And then Rule, we don't know about. I mean, let's be honest. Rule fell into the most unbelievable. I mean, he got a rich guy after him. I mean, what else could you ask for in life? Here's a guy who's coached.
Tell me about it, Mike. I'm waiting.
He's coached Tampa and the Baylor Bears, and he's got a guy knocking his door down, giving him $60 million.
And the one thing I do think we know about Rule, generally speaking, is he can build a program. That's the one thing he has shown that some of these others haven't or haven't had the opportunity to show yet. What he did at Temple and Baylor, I'm not going to say heroic, but he did a really good job with programs that aren't usually the kind that compete.
And
like
Baylor was in a lot of trouble too.
And Baylor also had a lot of
trouble,
adversity,
yes.
Mostly self-generated adversity.
Absolutely,
so, yes, absolutely that. Yep.
Yeah, and again, you just have to have somebody fighting over you, and he did, and he winds up getting. But a lot of people, I don't know if you heard it, Kim. I didn't hear his press conference, but a lot of people being overly critical of his press conference, saying he's running for president, he's a politician, blah blah. I didn't hear what he said, but he seemed to really bother a lot of people with his display at his press conference. So I don't know how. I guess it was very theatrical from what I can ascertain. I did not see any of it, though.
And I heard a lot of positives about it, Mike, but I was in Houston yesterday with the Texans and then traveling, and literally before I came on with you realized I've not even heard a snippet of it. So, but I heard a lot of positive, makes you want to run through a wall type of guy, So I guess it's in the, it's all in the.
Tell me what you took from the Texans. Listen, they were dead for a half, and then all of a sudden things and Watson almost willed them with his performance, and now they get a really tough spot. I mean, because their defense is going to have a whole lot of trouble handling that team. That's going to be a very tough spot. But what did you get from the Texans?
A couple of things. I thought. Certainly watching that game live, because I was in Houston over the weekend. I mean, I thought I'd be with the Bills this week. I mean, so that's how the first half went. I mean, I think most people at the half thought that the game was probably about over.
Absolutely.
There is something about Deshaun Watson, and I noticed it last year when I spoke to him, and then yesterday I didn't personally speak to him, but I attended his press conference, and we just said hellos. There is something about him, Mike, that he should be an even bigger shining light for the NFL than he is.
I agree.
I mean, he is incredibly insightful. He started talking about a book he's reading and what he's taking from it. And honestly, Mike, I say this completely humbly, I sat there thinking, this young man is so much smarter than I am. I mean, the way he was talking philosophically about a book and what he learned from it and everything, he's just very, very calm and very, very impressive. And you can almost see where the spirit of him that's pretty calm benefits him so much amid the frenzy of these games. And, I asked him about the play he made, eluding that sack.
That was almost like the Eli in the Super Bowl. It was amazing. It was a
lot like it.
Very much how he came out of that play was just unbelievable.
Yeah, and he said to me, it was a wow play, but it wasn't a surprise play. And I thought it was a remarkable thing to say, and he didn't sound like he was bragging at all when he said it. He also said it's one of the best plays he's made in his life, so would throwing a touchdown after getting kicked in the eye fall in that category, I think, too. But he is a remarkable leader.
He is.
And
I'll tell you,
understand.
On his first touchdown, he was dead at the 5-yard line, and he dragged those guys into the end zone. Absolutely dragged them. I mean, that kid, I loved him at Clemson, and I admit, I asked people to vote for him. I voted for him twice for the Heisman. I politicked for him to win the Heisman. He didn't win it either time. But I admit, I did not think he was going to be this good a pro because I thought that he would be too much of a running quarterback. And you know what? He's proved me wrong. He's been a much better player than I thought he would be in this level. I knew he had a knack, but I just didn't think he was big enough and was going to be able to throw it enough. But he has been much better than I ever thought he would be as a pro.
And Sunday's going to be, listen, Kansas City is going to be cold. That will present challenges that I don't always enjoy. But I think Sunday's game with him and Mahomes is going to be a lot of fun. I think in this area, you kind of, not that you tune the NFL out, and I never tune the NFL out, and I know that you don't, but there's just so much losing that goes on here right now, which I really hope changes for both the Jets and Giants next season. But when you watch these special players, Mike, and I know I work for NFL Network, but this has nothing to do with any of that. I remember why, as a little girl, I loved the NFL.
Absolutely. Those games were fun last weekend.
Yeah, I mean, and Mahomes is just, I mean, we all know what Mahomes is.
He's a rock star. He's a rock star.
Absolutely remarkable. Yeah. But, going back to when we started this conversation, here was my question yesterday, and it will be this weekend with the Texans. Can their big guys, and by big guys I mean Deshaun and JJ, and then obviously DeAndre Hopkins is a very special receiver. I think we all recognize that as
question.
well. But can they, again, lift their games and make plays that change the game? Because J.J. Watt's third-quarter sack, even though the Texans didn't even score a point yet, absolutely watching live changed that game.
Hey, it was at the point, I have to admit, at the time it happened, I said, big deal. All they did was get a field goal because Houston hadn't done anything yet.
Right.
But it turned out to be a very big play in the game. There's
big.
No question.
It was big. Deshaun obviously makes that crazy play, and they get the game-winning field goal.
And the two-point conversion and everything else that went on. And listen, I know Buffalo felt they got a couple of bad calls, which is everybody always does. Think they got a couple of bad calls. But, hey, Bills played hard. They played. They did. Hey, listen, the downfield block was a bad call. It was a bad call.
Agreed.
Yes, I agree. And again, the Bills can hold their head high. They did a good job. I think this is the wrong. I think the way the Kansas City defense has played the last 6 weeks, I don't think anybody could go in there this week and beat them. So I don't think Houston will, because I don't think anybody else could either.
I agree. I think they're 12 points per game, and I know they're number one in the league over that time defensively in terms of points allowed. They've been remarkable and good. By the way, good for Steve Spagnuolo.
Good for Spags, absolutely, because that didn't look good early in the season.
No.
It really didn't.
It did not.
Listen, we'll be watching you this weekend, so have fun. And so you're going to Kansas City?
I am going to Kansas City tomorrow.
Enjoy. Say hello to Andy Reid. For us, we're all pulling. I'm pulling for him. That's who I hope wins it this year.
He's easy to root for.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kim, very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Take care. Kim Jones, as we send her off to Kansas City for the weekend. She's right. That's going to be a lot of fun. The weather's going to be cold there on Sunday. Chiefs will still score points. Listen, Houston did a lot winning last week. That was a big comeback for them. They needed that. They couldn't put up another stinker in the first round. Tomorrow on a Football Friday, we'll go through all the games, bring you update on the key injuries like Clowney and Thielen and Ingram, and whether these guys are going to play or not this week, because that is critical. Thielen's got, and he made the huge catch last week, he's got stitches in his ankle. Clowney's got the core injury, which is the sports hernia of old. Now they call it a core injury. They need him in the worst way. Seattle's banged up going to Green Bay. You got Ingram. You have, obviously, the guys in Minnesota to worry about, including Thielen and a couple other guys to worry about injury-wise. So we'll get to all that tomorrow. Right now, you have the Niners as a 7-point choice. You have the Chiefs as a 9.5-point choice. You have the Ravens as an 8.5-point choice, and the Packers are up to a 4.5-point choice, because of the fact that the Seahawks are very, very banged up. We'll give you weather tomorrow on all 4 games and give you any last-minute stuff as we get ready for what is, if you polled the fans, I think divisional playoff weekend, the 2 back-to-back doubleheaders, 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock on Saturday, now 3 o'clock and 6:40 on Sunday. I think, as you hit January, then you cap that off with a Monday night where you have the championship game between Clemson and LSU. So it's a great football weekend from that standpoint. You look at guys who are going to be the next 2 number 1 picks in the draft the next 2 years. This is the best football weekend of the year. I think if you polled the fans, 80% of them would vote that this is the best football weekend of the year. And the ratings for last week, now they got really good games last week. So, yeah, I mean, you had 2 overtime games. You had no game decided by more than 8 points. Eagles even hung in there without their quarterback. They lose by 8. Pats is really a 1-point game that winds up being a 7-point game. Only mattered because if you took New England in a teaser, it didn't matter otherwise. But that should have been a 14-13 final. So you should have had 2 games in overtime, a 1-point game and an 8-point game. So the games couldn't be any tighter. You had terrific ratings last week for the NFL. The NFL has bounced back. Remember the ratings problems the NFL had 2 years ago? Well, the NFL, the ratings were up last year. The ratings were up this year. The wild card ratings were up higher than they had been in the last 5 years off this past weekend. TV ratings are good. Attendance is not great. This was the lowest attendance for the NFL since 2004. Now, is it because of anything going on? Well, a couple of places you might have like an example in New York, where the Giants have the biggest stadium in terms of capacity in the league. The Giants played in front of almost 9,000 empty seats every game. But they were a terrible team. That's the reason. It's not anything else. It's because they had a terrible team. That's why they played in front. Jacksonville had a bunch of empty seats because their team was bad. And the Bills had the biggest increase in attendance. Why? Because the team was exciting. And they won games. Winning is always the best. But in the years to come, I think you will see there will be smaller stadiums built. Capacity will be down. They'll build fancier stadiums with more bells and whistles. But it's harder to get you to go to the games now. It's harder to get you to invest the whole day. It's harder for you to deal with the traffic. And you stay home. Why? Because you like the big TV and the flexibility and replay. But you also like now that you can wager on the games from home. You can play DraftKings and play all your, other stuff that you play. All the games that you play, all the different leagues you're in, and all the things you do with the players and everything, so you can do all that. And I think that product is one that is, without any question, the allure of all that stuff is making home more enticing for the average fan than the stadium is. And the one big challenge that owners are going to have in every sport, but especially in the NFL, where you have to commit a day to the game, is that you are going to have to try to find a way to make the in-game experience more appealing, or you're going to continue to lose audience. Now, this is a league that makes so much money from television that before they have to do any work, these franchises already get a check that would choke a horse. That's why the salary cap next year is going to be over $200 million for a team. And you realize that for that to happen, what the revenues in this league have to be for each team to have a salary cap of over, I think it's going to be somewhere around $202 million a team, the salary cap, which shows you how outrageous, and with streaming the way it is, and with the incredible amounts of revenue that will be produced by streaming, the NFL is going to make plenty of money, but they're going to keep fighting this battle for the revenue that they do get from people going to the games. The secondary, the tertiary revenue that comes from that experience, that is going to have to be beefed up. You're going to have to give the people more if you're going to get them to keep going to the games. It's getting very, very enticing for them to stay home. Football's good at home for a lot of reasons. You don't have to deal with the traffic, and you have replay. And replay to me is the biggest thing I miss. I can't stand not having replay of the game because you can't see everything the first time. It's impossible. And at the game, you don't have the ability to do that. Then you add in all the other parts, the other elements that now have become part of the experience. Whether it's seeing the whole league, playing, fantasy football, now the gambling that you can do and all these different things, the gambling you can do during the game, almost play-by-play stuff that you can almost gamble on now. So from that standpoint, the battle to make it better, to make it more appealing in the stadium is going to be, I think, without question, the biggest challenge, because there's no issues this year. This is not because of anything to do with the flag or anything to do with Kaepernick or anything to do with issues. This is just business. Why attendance is down, but ratings are up. Because more and more, the revenue is about the revenue that this league produces in front of the camera. More and more and more, that's where they make their money. And that's just the way it's going to be, and it's not going to change. That doesn't mean they're going to stop trying to enhance the in-game experience. They will. They'll come up with different ways, whether it's better food or better access or more comfortable surroundings or different perks and bells and whistles, whatever it may come down to. They'll try to come up with ways to get you to go. But it's a fight that they're losing. Lowest attendance since 2004. That's crazy. Now, in just a minute, we'll go from, and you can stay on radio.com because the entire show every day from 5 to 6:30 is on radio.com. But at 6, we will be joined by WFAN. We will hit the fan, where today it's all about the Giants naming a new coach. Whenever they do, it is a very, very big day. And obviously, this afternoon they did with the press conference. I actually heard the head coach on with Joe and Evan when I went to pick my son Jack up at school. So I went and heard some of the interview they did with him earlier. I had seen his press conference. I was in the car for that, and then I was in the car for, hey, one of the things you do now is when you have teenage kids, you know, you're driving here, there. I have two 14s and a 13-year-old, 14-year-old twins and a 13-year-old. So, you know, I'm here, there, school, after school, practice, this, game, tutor, this, that, this. I mean, that's part of it. So hear it in drips and drabs. I did hear the press conference, which I thought he did well at. I did hear him with Joe and Evan, so I heard a lot of what the coach had to say today, and we'll talk about that when we come back. Good evening, everybody. This is Mike Zorn, as we'll take you right up until 6:30 on what's been a very, very busy day. Sorry for that little problem at the top of the show. So, obviously, whenever the Giants or anybody in town names a new coach, it's a big deal. When it's the football Giants, it's a little bigger deal. And although it's happened a couple of times in recent years, your hope, and I know the Giant fans, you can almost hear them leading with their hearts, hoping that they don't have to go through this again for a while. They're tired of going through it. They're not used to going through this. They're not used to all the losing. They're not used to the constant turnover with these coaches. They don't want any more of this to happen. And now they hope that they can pin their hopes and that things do turn around behind this 38-year-old special teams coach from Mississippi State who was a kind of jack of all trades, quarterback, you know, guy who did a lot of different things, played under Jackie Sherrill at Mississippi State, learned his football from Jackie Sherrill, who you remember was a very successful coach who coached a couple of players you may remember, like Dan Marino is one. He coached him at Pittsburgh. But, you know, guy like that rubs off on you. He said Jackie Sherrill had rubbed off on him. Then obviously he coached under Nick Saban and watched the Nick Saban team win championships. Then he coached under Bill Belichick and watched the Pats win championships and aided to it as the special teams coach. And I talked about this right after he got named. And I said, I like the idea of somebody who will coach the whole team. And he talked about that today. And that's what a special teams coach brings. He brings a different look than some guy who's a play caller does. And a lot of the guys we've had here have had that problem. To me, they have not had the qualities that head coaches have to have. Head coaches have to have presence. Head coaches who are going to be successful, they are detail guys, but they also just instinctively know where the problem is. They know how to put their finger on it. They know how to fix it. They know what's going on in their building. They know what's going on with their players. And they just have a feel and a touch with their team. And you hope, you don't know. I've told you this many times, and in a couple of interviews I did today out of town, I brought this up as a word of caution, but also just to show you that there's just no way of knowing. When a guy hasn't been a head coach, and most times he's been a coordinator, remember this young man has not even been a coordinator in essence. He's been a special teams coach, which is almost like a coordinator, but he hasn't been an offensive coordinator, hasn't been a defensive coordinator. He hasn't been a head coach. But even guys who are steeped in wonderful resumes, who have come from winning programs, who have shown you a deft touch in big games. I can think of a couple of guys who were so exceptional as assistants, but just were terrible head coaches. One of those is mentioned as a possible offensive coordinator here, and that's North Turner. North Turner was a brilliant offensive coordinator for those wonderful Cowboy teams. And you thought he'd be a successful head coach, but he wasn't. Every time he got the job, it didn't work out. Why? He was not a head coach. Bill Arnsparger was if you were going to build a head coaching prospect in a laboratory, you would build Bill Arnsparger. Bill Arnsparger was Don Shula's right-hand man. Shula coached the offense. Arnsparger coached the defense, the no-name defense, the famed 53 defense, the no-name defense that led the Dolphins to greatness, undefeated season, championships, storybook stuff. So when he was going to go and become a head coach, the team that's going to get this prized assistant who can't miss as a head coach, that was Bill Arnsparger. He came to the Giants, and he won 25% of his games. He was a disaster. He had no personality. He couldn't recruit you out of a burning building. And he was an utter failure as a head coach. This wonderful assistant, storied assistant. You see it in guys like Wade Phillips. You see it in guys like North Turner. You see it in guys like Bill Arnsparger. They can have all the success in the world. It doesn't make them head coaches. Head coaches are different. They have presence. They have instincts. They are generalists. They lead everybody. They motivate everybody. Assistants, the first man on the team, the star quarterback, the last guy who covers kicks. They know how to touch and press the buttons of every one of those guys. You hope that this guy is one of those guys. You don't know if he is. You hope he is. You hope that they're going to get it right this time. And it doesn't matter. Folks, when these searches begin, it doesn't matter what order it goes in. As I've mentioned many times, because I can't think of a more prominent example, Ara Parsegian was not Notre Dame's first choice as their head coach. They wanted Dan Devine because he was Catholic. Ara Parsegian was not. He was really a non-practicing Protestant who really wasn't a religious man. Dan Devine was a Catholic. They wanted Dan Devine. Dan Devine turned them down. They hire Ara Parsegian. Years later, they would never even admit to anybody. After 95, 17, and 4 and 3 national championships, they would never even think of admitting they ever thought of anybody else except Ara when he was the coach at Northwestern. Not true. He wasn't their first choice. Did it matter? No. Does it matter if somebody's not your first choice? Absolutely not. It means nothing. It means absolutely nothing to the process. You just have to hope you hit on the guy. So if they wanted Rule and he got bought out from under him, so be it. If they wanted another guy and he went somewhere else, so be it. They put their finger on a guy, whether they were sold by what Bill Belichick said or they were impressed by his interview, whatever it took that brought him here, now he's here. Now it's about him. Now it's about Judge putting together a staff, and he's been told that he'll get to put together his own. Now it's about this guy. Is he the right guy at the right time? to be the guy to lead the Giants. And the word to underline is lead. There are three things you need in this league to win. You need an owner that gets it, who will give you the things you need to win. You need a head coach who can do the job, who has presence, who can lead, who can run the entire staff and run the whole place. Make the players accountable and also motivate the players. Coach has got really two jobs. He's got to give the players a plan they can win with and then get them to play hard. That's it. If he fails in either one of those, he's not going to get the job done. He's got to get him a plan that will work, and then he's got to get him to play hard. Neither one is easy. There are problems along the way on every stretch of land. Doesn't matter. With every passing mile, there's another problem. This guy wants a bigger contract. This guy wants more playing time. This guy's not happy. That guy's not happy. This coach is looking elsewhere. This guy's got an agenda. Hey, this guy's hurt. That's the way it works. What the Giants have lacked in recent years, they've lost their way. They've lost their way as far as owner goes. They've lost their way as far as the front office goes. They've lost their way as far as the head coach goes. They are in desperate need of a leader. Hopefully, they found one today. I know, having heard his press conference today, he did a good job. He didn't make a bad first impression. We know plenty of guys who have. He didn't. He made a good first impression. You liked what you heard today. I think most people did. Then I heard him doing an interview with Joe and Evan before, so I heard him answering the questions. And again, you liked what you heard. You liked the message that he wants to bring. You liked the way he went about answering the questions. And it just sounded like maybe he's the right guy at the right moment. Again, it's not a perfect science. There are no assistants who become head coaches who are automatic. None. And so many times, the guy you don't get rid of. John Mara talked about having more patience. Hey, Giants didn't have a whole lot of patience when a first year that was a nightmare for Bill Parcells. A nightmare. He had family tragedy. He had players die. He had assistants die. He had all kinds of problems. Everything went wrong. And the Giants were under pressure, ready to get rid of him. The guy they wanted, Howard Schnellenberger, wasn't available. They didn't know was that he and Parcells at the time shared the same agent. It was before agents were well known in those days. A guy named Robin Fairley who died in that plane crash with Payne Stewart. That was Bill's agent. He was also Howard Schnellenberger's agent. So that got blown up in their face, so they kept him. The rest is history. Sometimes the move you don't make is the best move of all. And sometimes the guy you don't get, the guy you get second or third, is the one that turns out to be the one. Hopefully, the Giants got one who's got some staying power and will provide some leadership. Back after this. Head coach of the football Giants, he was asked today about who he is.
There's a question out there I'm sure a lot of people are asking. That's number one, who am I? Well, maybe I can explain that a little bit better, but instead of saying who am I, by telling you what's relevant in this conversation with being a coach of the New York Giants, what I'm about.
5.
And what I'm about is an old school physical mentality.
Old school physical mentality. How about a style of play?
We'll play fast. We'll play downhill. We'll play aggressive. We'll punch you in the nose for 60 minutes. We'll play every play like it has a history and a life of its own with a relentless competitive attitude.
5.
You like to
We'll
hear
play
that?
fundamentally sound. We will not beat ourselves. That is our mission right here.
Well, not beating yourself is half the battle. Play smart, play tough, do your job. That is the mantra. I thought you might hear "do your job" today. That obviously the mantra of the Patriots. Play smart, play tough, do your job. How about his philosophy?
Offense, defense, special teams. Our philosophy is going to be to put pressure on the opponent to prepare for multiple things. Within that, we have to have personnel versatility, and we have to have flexibility schematically to make sure that whoever we play, we can adjust our game plan to maximize our strengths versus their weaknesses.
Think about what you heard there, folks, about versatility of player. You think New England. And then you think about the flexibility of play, being versatile and being flexible. What team, the thing that Bill Belichick has changed the most in the National Football League is that he tailored every game plan to the opponent. In the old days of the NFL, you played a certain way. Dallas played this way. They brought their multiflex offense. They brought their stunt 4-3 defense. The Bears played this way. In the days of the great Bear team under Buddy Ryan and Ditka, they were going to blitz. They were going to get off the bus blitzing. You knew that. You knew how they were going to play. If you go back to any team, they had a way of playing. Belichick changed all that. His team has always been chameleon-like. He would throw it one week, run it with power the next week. Next week, come out and fall wide and throw it 50 times. Everything was different, tailored to the opponent, and that's what you heard from this coach talking about versatility, talking about flexibility. In New England, you have to know your job and you have to know the next guy's job. There, they actually teach by putting people in the opposite room. They have wide receivers go in the deep back room and learn how deep backs are taught so that they get to see how the other side lives. Same thing, vice versa. Deep backs, look at how wide receivers train and prepare so that you understand what you're up against. Plus, they always give you the idea that they will call on you to do any job. You're there to play football. You're a football player. You're there to do whatever job they ask you to do that week. So they look for and lean on versatility, flexibility, the same things that Judge echoed in his press conference. How about leaning on people?
And as a young head coach, I'm going to lean on Dave Gettleman. I'm going to lean on having the right people in the building to fill in some of the blanks that I may have. I need men in my building who are willing to walk into my office and tell me the truth, and we can be on the same page. Now, we may have some disagreements at times, but we're going to walk out in that field with those players and all have the same vision, same voice.
All right, now, leaning on Gettleman, well, listen, we might have a difference of opinion there on that one, but hey, you get the idea. Question is, as he builds this staff, let's see where he decides to put the experience. Now, let's assume that the dollar figures, and it can be, because I can tell you, I know this for a fact, building staffs here is very tricky because you'll get guys who won't come because they can't afford a house in a certain neighborhood, and they're selling a house that is $350 or I'm just giving you a number, is $400 in the town they're living in right now. You're asking them to come here, and the house they want is $800. They can't make it work. So now their wives are upset. When the wives are upset, they're upset. That's where you lose assistant coaches. So here, it's tricky getting the staff. The question I want to see is, though, is where does he go for the experience? Where does he bring in the old hand? Does he bring him in on defense? Does he bring him in on offense? Watch to see. He won't bring him in on both. He'll have an aggressive guy, an aggressive young guy on one side, and he'll have an old hand on the other. Let's see which way he goes with the old hand versus the young guy. It'll be one or the other. One of the two assistants. Most likely, I would guess, if you made me guess right here, I would guess the offensive coordinator is going to have some age on him, and very good chance he could be a former head coach in a Turner or a Jason Garrett, somebody along that line. What about culture?
You come in, you put the team first. We're going to ask our players at times to do things that necessarily may not be what they have in mind for themselves. But if it's
5.
best for the team, they have to be willing to go forward with it because that's what a winning culture is.
How about the team and just the whole environment that the team exists in?
I want this team to reflect this area. I want the people that pay their hard-earned money in the neighborhoods of New York, North Jersey, South Jersey to come to our games and note the players on the field play with
5.
the same attitude they wake up with every morning. That is blue collar. It's hard work.
You know, he touched on something today, folks, that I could not agree with more, and that is how important it is to operate in a city where they care. Nothing worse, and this is true, and you hear this all the time from coaches and managers, and it's true. I don't care if you're a coach. I don't care if you're a talk show host, if you're a broadcaster. You want to be in a city where there's passion, where the people care. You don't want to be in a city where they don't care about their sports, where they don't care about their teams. You want them to care about your teams. And as a head coach, you'll take some screaming and yelling. You'll take some criticism. You'll take some unhappiness. You want people to care. And he talked today about being in Tuscaloosa, where I think they care a little bit about college football, or being in Philadelphia, or being here, where you want fans that are rabid. You want fans that care, that are passionate about the team. Even if they aren't always complimentary, they care. And that's important. You don't want to do a job in a town where no one cares about your product or cares about what you're doing. They don't care about that. Now, this guy obviously spent time under two giants. You know, recently on HBO, there was a special. If you haven't seen it, take the time to look at it. It's a special about the relationship between Belichick and Saban. The guy who comes out of that union, remember, Saban is a Belichick guy. The guy who comes out of that union is this head coach, this new head coach. Let's hear what he said about those two.
Both Coach Saban and Belichick both had the same philosophy and values and beliefs. From working for both of them, they both did it their own way. And that's something right there. You can't try to be somebody else. And I'm not going to try to be anybody else.
5.
Myself. If that's good enough for you, great. If it's not, that's good too. But I'm going to be myself.
I like that. I like that as an answer. I really do. Because I've seen some of these young coaches think they were Bill Parcells or think they were Bill Belichick. And you know what? You're not. Don't try to be those guys. Don't try to do things like they do. Don't try to run a press conference with the crusty charisma that a Parcells brought to it. Don't try to run a press conference with the flippant attitude that a Belichick brings to that press conference. No one can do that. He can do that. He can go in there and answer every question on to Cincinnati. You know what? You can't. Don't try to be them because you aren't them. And you have to be who you are, honest to yourself, and be real. Because if you're not, no one's going to buy it. No one wants you to be an imitation. No one wants you to be doing an imitation. They want you to be you. And if that is what he takes from those guys, you know, that they are themselves. And, you know, Saban and Belichick, they're not exactly alike. They have some core beliefs in certain ways of football. And they all have, like, Belichick and Parcells couldn't be more different as people. Couldn't be more different in personality. Couldn't be more different in approach in every way. But they both have core philosophies about the sport. They think bigger is better. They believe that everybody on defense has to know how to tackle, even the corners. Corners can't play for them if they don't know how to tackle. Everybody tackles. Otherwise, you don't play. And those kind of beliefs is what you want as a basis. But you want to be your own guy. And we'll learn what that is for Joe Judge. We heard a little of it today. He was honest. He didn't step out and make crazy statements. He didn't say anything today that you would have trouble, him having trouble back up. He didn't make anything today that was outrageous. He didn't make any statements that were outrageous. He didn't make any claims that were outrageous. He didn't make any promises that were outrageous. He promised you that the team would play hard that would play tough, that it would stay away from mistakes, and it will try and play winning football. Nothing wrong with that. Now, he takes over a team that needs a lot of work. He's not inheriting a team that's, ready to win. He's inheriting a team that needs a lot of work and needs a coach to lead it. They didn't have a Pro Bowl player on this Giant team this year. This team has been god awful the last couple of years. Terrible on defense. Terrible in the fourth quarter of games. Unable to get anything done in terms of realistic wins and losses. It's been a it's been a disappointing, it's been an ugly football team. That's what he walks into here. He's got a big job in front of him. It's not going to get solved in a day. But you hope that what you see is somebody who, right from the start, lets the players know who's boss, who provides some leadership, who makes the players accountable. I think in football, you have to make the players accountable. Everyone now, coaches, they're no longer a coaches league. Now it's a players league. I don't buy that for a second. I think players want to be led. I think they want to be disciplined. I don't think they want to do it if they don't believe you know what you're doing. But I think once they believe that you can give them a plan they can win with, then they'll buy in. And once you start winning, they'll really buy in. Nothing gets people to buy in more than some success. And here's the one thing, and it's clear as day in this league, you can turn a 4 or 5 win team into a 10 or 11 win team in 1 year in this league. It can be done. Things can click and fall into place that quickly. That is not impossible. It happens in this league all the time. You just got to have the right man, coaching the right staff, and picking the right players. Now, that's a lot of rights for a team that's done everything wrong. Hopefully they took a step in the right direction today by naming this guy as their head coach. So now the Giants belong to a judge. We'll see where that takes us. Sal Licata's next. We'll see you tomorrow with a Football Friday program.